Welcome, our distinguished panelists. We're going to be jumping into the proper discussions. We're supposed to have Mr. Fetchinakoto. Emmanuel Awuni could not make it, but we'll have Professor Bobkin who will share. We have Joyce Williams, Sarah Anku, who will populate the panel. I will be offering moderation as the moderator had to be elsewhere. So if you'd kindly like to mount the podium for your seats, be very happy so that we can begin the real conversation on the state of after trading. A round of applause, please. Oh, anyway. Anyway. Do we have Mr. Mixon Opoku in the house? Mr. Mixon? Okay. Mr. Fetchinakoto? No, he's on his way. Okay. Emmanuel Awuni is not. So at least we have three distinguished panelists. Professor Bobkin, if you are ready, you can take over. We'll be very happy if you can do that for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Our chair, thank you very much, Executive Director. All protocol observed. And I think that it's a great joy to be here and to be talking about something very important on the continent. As important as the African continental free trade. I believe that in the last 1.5 years, with the exception of COVID, the item that has gained a lot of attention on the continent has been the AfCFTA on COVID came. It's as though the same wave that greeted the continent when we were talking about independence. It was being discussed everywhere. In response to that, we had the Organization of African Unity, now AU. And I agree that the single most important development on the continent with economic and commercial significance is the AfCFTA. And to that, I think that is good news for us. It is good news not because the theoretical benefits that have been discussed have been realized, but it's an important step, particularly at a time when the whole world is moving apart. Africa is getting more closer through greater economic, trade and financial integration. But there is greater potential that through digitization and digitalization could actually make this work much faster. From my little own understanding of trade and economic cooperation, it took certainly Europe a lot of years, decades. It should take Africa much shorter. Because we have the opportunity of learning from the errors of others. So we don't need to repeat that and make it work for ourselves. To the extent that Africa has a big market with a population of 1.3 billion and a GDP of more than $3 trillion, this is huge. And it can only get better. This development is happening at a time when COVID and the various containment measures have practically reversed decades of gains that we have made against poverty. And the worsening inequality that we are seeing, enhanced also as a result of COVID-19 that affected more economies that are more based on contact-intensive activities with lockdowns here and there. To the extent that the AfCFTA must work for Africans, and to the extent that they must work for the majority of Africans, if not all of us, and not a tiny few. And the reason I'm saying so is that in the last 3 decades or so, Africa has seen positive growth. But that growth did not benefit every African. In fact, it benefited a tiny few. For example, it's just 0.1% of West Africans that have almost more than 90% of the wealth of that sub-region. So just a tiny few people in Africa have made it big time, whilst the majority only look on. For AfCFTA to work, it must tackle inequality aggressively and make sure that it works for every African. But whilst we have talked about the hypothesized benefits and all of that, there is no guarantee that AfCFTA would actually work for Africa. It may, to some extent, work for the rest of the world, much more than for us. In the same way that through colonization and the economic structure they left for us benefited them, it's the same way that if we are not careful, this will end up working for them. So we must look at the ownership structure, ownership content as well, and make sure that we ring-fence the benefit for Africa. As we are here discussing, it's not everybody that is taking note for the benefit of Africa, but they might also be taking note for the benefit of their countries. The next question is, because when African countries discovered oil, we thought that it was going to change the dynamics, is that not so? And then we discovered gold and all of that. Where are the benefits? So there's a real possibility that we look at all these things with a bigger eye to make sure that this doesn't happen like other interventions on the continent. It is worth to note that 14 out of the 18 countries in the world where the number of extreme poor is rising are in Africa. And by 2030, the world's more than 90% of the world's poor will be in Africa. At a time when we are talking about AfCFTA. To this extent, my understanding is that AfCFTA must embrace inclusivity and must work for Africa, and not a tiny few within the context of Africa working for Africa, and not Africa for a tiny few, or the usual Africa for the rest of the world. If you think that we're a major supplier of cocoa, a major input into chocolate, and Africa's share is that small, and you think about coffee and our share is that small, you should just know that how much Africa has served the rest of the world, they won't let go just like that. And everybody is watching. The implementation drive, and the reason I'm particular about this and why this event is key, is that a couple of months down the line with implementation, we need real data to evaluate how far we are doing. And we need to harvest the experience and the challenges of the private sector in trying to take advantage of this. And to the extent that we need real data in terms of custom regulation and compliance, standardization across the continent, these are very, very helpful. Data must be provided to facilitate the monitoring of countries' compliance and also harvest the experience and challenges of private sector, given that the real players on this whole dynamics are the private sector, and their experience will be very fundamental. And we must move fast to address tariff and non-tariff challenges, particularly when it comes to fiscal connectivity. And I was happy somebody talked about it here. Sometimes it's harder and expensive traveling within West Africa than traveling between Africa and the rest of the world. It's easier to catch a flight to Europe than to catch a flight to Benin. And sometimes the transaction cost is much more. In fact, sometimes to travel to some countries in West Africa, you need to go to East Africa and then what? Come down and all of that. Until we address this lack of fiscal connectivity in terms of the huge infrastructure deficit, is going to be difficult. We will meet time and again and talk about the theoretical benefit of AfCFTA, but until we address all these things, it's going to be difficult to translate that into actual. Where there are challenges, there are opportunities. And the fact that this is huge, with a big market like that, what it also means is that development finance institutions within Africa must come together and pool resources to finance the infrastructure deficits, because the gains from that are real, and that should drive investment. That should put finance together to make sure that we work at this and ensure the benefit is across the board. Thank you. This will be my initial submissions. Thank you. Who is an intellectual property rights expert, to also give us some opening remarks. Let's clap to welcome her.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. Permit me to say all protocol observed. I feel like the odd one out here because so far the conversation has been on the AfCFTA trade, and I'm here to talk about intellectual property rights. So what's the relation here? What have we to do with intellectual property? So I see a lot of entrepreneurs here, businesses, SMEs, and your products mean a lot to you. You have invested a lot in your products. You have invested innovative ideas. You have created, you have inventions, created these expressions, creativity, generally, let me just say, your creativity and innovation. And you have also invested funds to create your brands and to market them. Some of you have won awards for the hard work and your investment. And how will you feel if I ride on your reputation? How will you feel if I start competing with you on the same market, using your own brands, using your own products at a lower price? Because I don't have to incur the cost of creating those products or inventions. You have to bear the cost of R&D. Mine is just to copy, so I can sell at a lower price, and you cannot. So I ride on your reputation and your sweat. That is the essence of intellectual property. Your intellectual property in trade must be protected. We need laws to protect the trade, because if you have trade ongoing, we have opened our borders, quota free. We've heard all that about the AfCFTA. So what it means is that you have a huge market, and if you have competitors who want to copy and steal your ideas, they can do it on a large scale. So that's why we need the intellectual property protocol to protect you, to protect your goods and your services. So basically, I'm here to shed some light on that. And we know that the IP protocol is yet to be negotiated. I'm not too sure the stage at which it has reached now, but I would like to draw our attention to some of the challenges that currently face us as a continent, so that probably if someone is listening, they will find some space in the IP protocol to help us. So first of all, as a businessman, you have opened the markets. You are interested in markets outside Ghana, but the laws are different. The laws are not harmonized. So you don't know what is going to face, you're going to face in the next country. Let's take an example. If you want patents, we use patents to protect your inventions. So you have an invention and you want protection in other countries apart from Ghana. You have to remember that intellectual property rights are territorial in nature. So the fact that you have protection in Ghana doesn't mean you have protection in Liberia, South Africa. You still have to go there to get protection. So from Ghana, I'm given a 20-year protection for my patent. Then I move on to Malawi. Malawi says they'll give me 16 years protection. I moved to Tanzania. They said they'll give me 10 years with a possibility of extending by an extension by 5 years. That is not uniform. When it comes to applying for protection also, you can apply through your intellectual property offices in your various countries. You can also apply through a regional body. In Africa, we have 2 intellectual property bodies. We have the ARIPO, African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, and we have the Francophone one, OAPI. ARIPO is made up of 20 member states, and Ghana is one. OAPI, 17. OAPI follows a unitary system so that when you file one application, it covers the whole 17 countries. So when it is approved, you know you have secured in all the 17 countries. But when you apply through ARIPO doesn't follow the unitary system. So it means that each member will decide whether to grant it or not. Now you come to the rest of the African countries. I said 20 plus 17, we are 55. So what happens to the rest? And it may interest you to know that the giants on the continent in terms of economic weight are not members of any of the 2. Nigeria is not a member of any of the 2 bodies. South Africa is not. So definitely you have to go to that country to get the protection that you want. Again, if you look at trademarks, you can use the 3 routes: through the national office, through the regional office, through the International Bureau of WIPO. Again, not all member states are parties to these international agreements that establish these organizations. So of course they don't use those systems. I come back again, I use Nigeria as an example. So you have Nigeria not being a member of the Madrid system for the registration of trademarks. Nigeria is not a member of ARIPO. So if you have a trademark that you use for your brands and you want protection, well, you can say that you apply through ARIPO for some countries, through WAPI, and you capture the 17 countries, and then you have to move to the individual countries. But the Madrid system, most African countries are also part of the Madrid system, so you can say you put in one Madrid application and it will cover everything. But then you come down to Nigeria, that is not part of the Madrid system, so you have to go there. So for some of us IP support service providers, I am a lawyer, I work in a law firm, Ankudo Tanko at Law. What we did was to open another office in Nigeria just to address this. So it makes the work a bit more difficult. You have to be more creative and innovative in order to serve your clients better. Now, talking about the IP offices, they also have their challenges. Major one. For an IP protocol to work, you need an effective administrative body. IP administration is just not, it's not about the protocol, it's not about the agreements that we enter into. The practical aspect of it. How is the IP administered? Why is it that we don't have a lot of SMEs protecting their rights? From my personal experience, there are too many frustrations in the system. You put in an application and so many delays. Communication is a problem. You complain and it doesn't really work. So an advice to the negotiators is that when handling these, I have heard actually, before I move on to the advice, I've heard conversations here and there about how the administration of IP should be. Some have said that we should merge the 2 regional bodies. Others have said they should be the building blocks. For me, I don't have a position on that. But whatever position is taken by the negotiators, they have to make sure that they strengthen the IP administrative bodies. If it's a national offices they are going to rely on, they must look in that direction, because the IP officers have the power to make or to derail the whole AfCFTA IP protocol. We know the importance of IP in trade. What can happen is that if you apply for, if you protect your brands, your trademarks, your products here, and somebody infringes, of course, you have the right to enforce your rights here. Similarly, if you have protected in other jurisdictions, you have the right to also enforce. But if you don't, then you are left bare. You now have to struggle to go through the thought of passing off, and lawyers here and there, judges will have to make a decision on your rights and all that. So to avoid all that, you may want to protect your IP. So if the IP officers are not forthcoming, then there is a big challenge. Now, apart from that, you as entrepreneurs, you as SMEs, you may want to look at third-party IP rights. You may be interested in that because as we expand, as we open our borders, people may be more interested in their IPRs, especially the foreigners, and they would want to enforce their rights. So in as much as you are trying to protect yours, you would also want to avoid infringing on third-party rights. One other thing that also comes up is the exhaustion of rights. Under IP, we say that after the first sale, your rights are exhausted. In some of our laws, we say the exhaustion is international. Ghana is one. In other places, they say it's national. So which one do we take? Do we take national? Do we take international? Maybe we can look at a regional exhaustion of rights just to facilitate the trade. If you look at, coming back to the laws again, we may want to look at harmonizing the laws to some extent. We appreciate the fact that we are at different levels of economic development, and so and we also belong to various international treaties and conventions and legally binding instruments, and we have obligations under that. One typical one is the TRIPS agreement, and we have flexibilities in those TRIPS agreement. So for those in the negotiation of this IP protocol, the negotiators may wish to maintain the flexibilities of the TRIPS agreement, and at the same time be innovative in their drafting, such that it takes care of areas of competitive or comparative advantage. We have our traditional knowledge, genetic resources, folklore. We also have geographical indication. Where you have a product and it has a link to a particular geographical area and there's value arising out of that. For instance, I have seen the interesting packages at the entrance, cocoa and the chocolate and the coffee. Yes. So probably, if I understand the coffee is from Ethiopia. Ethiopia coffee has gained a reputation. They should be able to market their coffee using the geographical indication to add value to what they have done. And with the cocoa as well, I understand our cocoa is also unique, so we can look at the geographical indication. So the IP protocol could also look in that direction. I will be done in a minute. So basically, I think I would leave it here for now and maybe follow up in subsequent in a discussion panel. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, so really good evening or good afternoon. It's been a pleasure meeting some of you, and I look forward to meeting some more people after the event, and for those joining us online and for those who are present here with us. So I will shift from technical and go into what this, the diaspora, what is the role of the diaspora in all the conversations around the AfCFTA. So the African Union has declared the diaspora as the 6th region of the 5 regions of Africa. So if you look at the structure of the African Union and the regions that constitutes the African Union, they all do have really some strong representation during discussions and at the table. And that is something that the diaspora is not there yet. I think that the relationship between the diaspora and continental Africa has been about the remittances of funds. And actually, it wasn't until there were studies conducted to see how much remittances flows from the diaspora into their native countries before even governments began to pay attention. And I think that has been a lot of missed opportunities because of our inability to capture and focus on some of the relationships. But I think starting from 2019, with the year of return and some additional campaigns, there's been some changes that had happened in terms of what will be the relationship between the diaspora and continental Africa. And I think there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm just going to focus on two things when it comes to the AfCFTA. There are a lot of diasporas who are entrepreneurs in their native countries. And there are opportunities for those entrepreneurs to collaborate with entrepreneurs on the continent to work together. The diaspora serves as unofficial ambassadors for their native countries. So, for instance, in the United States, where they have the preferential trade agreement of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, we see that there are several SMEs who will want to take advantage of AGOA and have no idea how to go about it. And the United States, through USAID, have put forth some information. But just imagine that if you have a partnership with your brother from Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, wherever, in the United States, where they can actually also help you with the research and help you in collaboration to prepare your products to gain access to the United States market. Another opportunity for the diaspora collaborating in terms of SMEs is also capitalization. We look at the issue of remittances, right? We send money to our families for school, for medicine, for food, for whatever, for happy birthdays, whatever the occasion is. But just imagine that your group of family members can come together, and instead of just sending $100 whenever you call or $50 whenever you need, to actually look at your business and formalize and structure it, and then decide that instead of the regularly sent $50, we are going to aggregate that with friends, with other relatives, and then input that as a capitalization for your business. That will help you to grow. That will help SMEs on the continent to grow, to be able to employ others, and to expand. Because when you receive that remittance and you spend, that's it. The money circulated once, it's gone. But if it's an investment into your business, then it circulates more than once because you invest and reinvest the profit in it. So how do we go about achieving this kind of relationship? It's really having the diaspora also as part of the discussions of the AfCFTA. You know, right now, the way that conversations are being held, the diaspora is on the sideline and receiving the information and listening, and people are learning about it through webinars and other things like that. I think that it would be really prudent for the African Union, the head of states of the African countries, to really be intentional about the engagement of the diaspora, to have the diaspora representative really at the table of the negotiations, of discussions, and try to implement them intentionally and not as something that is afterthought. The other issue that I'll focus on in terms of the diaspora partnership is really enabling the business environment. And that is not only to support diaspora, but also to support really entrepreneurs and SMEs that are on the continent. Because as the Secretary General stated, and Professor Bopkins also restated, nobody is interested in having to set up a business where you have to jump through 60 hoops and 60 steps to get one thing done. it's just not efficient, and really it's not worth it. And so for us to really be able to begin or to continue to advance and to have that support, we have to find ways of making our environments enabling for businesses. And these days it's not that hard. We all have internet. We consume content all over the world because of the internet. Data might be expensive in some parts of the world, but it's reasonably enough that price that we can use that opportunities. So access to online business registrations, access to tax codes that are transparent, that is understandable, and that is consistent, access to capitalization, bank accounts, setting up bank accounts. And we have to really be thinking outside the box, because there are countries who are creating like e-citizenships to allow people outside of their borders to still participate effectively as citizens. And that is some of the innovations that we really need to think about as we move forward with the AfCFTA and in our engagement with the diaspora. It cannot be business as usual, and it cannot be always year of return where you have a number of people come, we have parties, we do have some talks, and we spend some money, and then you're gone, and that's it. What does that do? So for a period of time, you can count growth from the diaspora, but that is a short period of time. We really need to think innovatively and use access to online platforms to engage the diaspora, to make their contribution a place for them to go and have resources to submit questions, to engage in meaningful discussions. I know that sometimes when there are events like UN General Assembly, World Bank meetings, head of state and other ministers will try to meet with their diaspora. We don't have to wait for those occasions to actually have town halls to meet with the diaspora to engage. We can use the availability of online platforms to really have constant engagement. Several countries have begun to set up diaspora offices, and I will urge those offices not to just be something set up and wait for the diaspora to come, but to also be proactive in really reaching out to their diaspora and engaging them from their adapted countries, and then continue to build that relationship with them. So I'm going to pause here and allow Professor Bobkins to start with the questions, and we'll continue the discussions. So thank you all.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Joyce. Just want to say something very quickly about the diaspora. I think the points you raised about the diaspora are very critical and very key. The Kingdom of Eswatini was here in Accra early June to discuss with the International Organization for Migration, to learn lessons from Ghana on how Ghana manages its diaspora. I have to confess that I didn't know that Ghana does so well on diaspora issues. Apparently it does. So people are learning from Ghana on diaspora, the diaspora offices that we've been creating, that kind of thing, and that's good to know. But the other thing is that countries like Kenya are doing very well on diaspora and remittances, and I think the AU is trying to get them to be more involved because they've made a lot of money from remittances, about $1 billion or so. So the question then is, countries like Kenya and Ghana, can they not come together to begin to build best practices around diaspora? Triangulate that with the United States, for example, the diaspora office. So there are many, many possibilities that exist on the diaspora, given that it's a sixth region. For the rest of you who have relatives in the US, anytime you are there, you need to know that she is the person that you need to see at the office. You need to get details from the office in Virginia, because you will be at home when you get to the After Policy Network, the US Diaspora Office. She'll be able to give you all the necessary information as well. And interestingly, the Association of African Universities TV has an office not too far, I think, from, and so there you go, a little bit of information you did not know about how Africa is doing great things across the world. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand over now to Professor Bobkin, who will then steer some of the questions, and then we'll round up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give you 2 minutes each, and then I'll go to the audience. It's possible there are some questions that they would want some clarification based on the initial submissions. But I want to come to you first. We've already started trading, and we are not yet done with the intellectual property, right? Is it the right way to go?
Thank you very much. It's not the ideal way, but we have started from somewhere. At least the first step is to start operationalizing the AfCFTA, but we shouldn't delay too much, because the more we delay, the more vulnerable SMEs will be to the theft of their IPRs.
Thank you very much. If you have a question in the audience, I'll be glad to take that and then relate that to our panelists, or if you want me to address that. So you could just show by hand, and then I'm sure the mic will get to you. Okay, so whilst we wait for you, I want to come to you. So to the SME, to the private sector, we have been told that the AfCFTA is actually for them. What is the relationship with the diaspora office, with the private sector, SME, in taking advantage of the AfCFTA? In what way can we have this collaboration get better?
Thank you. So I think that, as I said, most of the African countries does have embassies overseas, and they typically have trade attaches and the trade desks. And so it becomes really imperative for the trade desks to be empowered in terms of the knowledge of AfCFTA. I remember a while back in Washington, I was in a program, and we had asked one ambassador, and he had no idea what the AfCFTA was. And so it becomes really imperative that really we empower the staff at the embassy at the basic to be able to direct people in country that, well, if it's Ghana that you want to go, then this is who you need to get in touch with. If we don't open that communication line, then we're joking.
Oh, great. Is there a question from the audience? Okay, all right. Can we take the mic to...
Hello, can I help with the mic? Hello. Okay. Yes. My question is an indirect question. I'm going to put someone on the spot. Dr. Crystal Spell. She's one of Africa's leading researchers on migration. She's in Ghana doing a fellowship at Legon. She has a great mind looking specific at issues on Africa's migration, peace and security, and all these things to do with the mobility component of the African Continental Free Trade Area. If I did not do this, you would not speak. So I have come to you, Dr. Christos. Well, you have the floor. I'm sure you have some questions on diaspora. And you can link that with migration and after. So please go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I have to say thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel. Yeah, actually I have some questions, but I just did not want to distract the discussion. My work really is on well-being, and on this diaspora I've been thinking we've been focusing a lot on remittances. I'm feeling also that AfCFTA can also be a point where, instead of the government just talking about remittances, they could also use it to address problems that Africans in diasporas are facing, because there are a lot of issues concerning racism, discrimination, some of them very violent, even factual, but still all you talk about the diaspora is remittances and how they can do trade or contribute to the economy. The second point I want to make is the diaspora is actually a very different group. And recently, especially during the pandemic, I've been following a lot of webinars on how they can contribute to the AfCFTA and benefits. But also I've been wondering, AfCFTA is for the benefit of Africans, African businesses, right? And if we attend a lot of webinars on how, for example, Virginia could benefit from AfCFTA, how is to link companies in the US or companies in Finland, where I say with Africa companies so that they could benefit from AfCFTA. How do we actually make sure to see that the benefits of this free trade agreement is actually for African businesses, and that it's not just a matter of linking these countries or even diaspora, which comes a lot with the backing of the country to come and benefit again from this free continental trade agreement, while the small companies in Africa, they are not benefiting. So I mean, if you could give insight or contribution to this, I guess, thank you.
Thank you very much. We shouldn't have missed this.
Exactly. No, thank you so much. You raised some really great points, and I'll start with the first one in terms of the struggle of the diaspora. COVID-19, for instance, there were a lot of members in the diaspora who were struggling to really keep up with their own personal expenses, with work, with the social issues. I remember that in Senegal, actually, the government of Senegal was reaching out to their diaspora and assisting their diaspora, some even financially, to help them during COVID. So you're right that the diaspora is not a ATM or just a genie who brings money. There are really different constructs in the diaspora. There are some diasporans who are in high-level positions and get incomes, as well as some diasporas who are on welfare and homeless and suffer a great deal overseas. So I think that we need to disabuse ourselves of the fact that if somebody is living outside the continent of Africa, they are living. To your point about connecting businesses to, let's say, Virginia, which was actually a webinar that happened. I live in Virginia. So our state senator hosted that, and also other places. The way I see the relationship so that it will benefit Africans is, for instance, when you have a trade delegation from whether the US, Europe, wherever, coming to the continent of Africa, it's typically not constitutive of natives of that particular country. So let's say US, Caucasian, or even US African Americans with very limited knowledge of really the domestic and the conditions of the country. Most of it's coming from World Bank research, or just coming from what Forbes had put out, just really high-level information. What the diaspora can help to really make this relationship more solidified is also providing that local knowledge and components into it. I have been advocating that a lot of diaspora programs that happens even in the US tends to target professionals and tend to look at people who are in higher income brackets. But there are diasporas who are janitors, and there are issues of sanitation on the continent, and their knowledge working in that industry can actually help also in trying to address the issues of sanitation. So we really need to be very broad in terms of the way that we look at these issues and be more inclusive, going from every spectrum of the income brackets, the education brackets, the socioeconomic status, in order to really derive the maximum benefits that we can in terms of building this relationship.
Thank you. I think you had a question, and we don't want to miss it.
My name is Lambetha, and my question is very simple. Now, we are looking at the after dream of making Africa, way bigger than what it is now by including ourselves in industrialization and all that. My question is this, that there are so many young people venturing into things like farming and all that. But for someone like me who is into farming, most of the time the exposure that we have, they demand that you have maybe a website, you have this, you have that, and it makes it more competitive. So it really stifles like your extent, like the degree of your exposure, because all the things they need from you, you don't have it yet, but you have the dream and you have a plan. So with this vision of AfCFTA, I want to know if there's anything that is going to include like the undergrads, like those that have the vision and they have the plan but are not yet there, because I believe that the more opportunities we have, the better this dream is going to be. So how are we going to be included to make sure that this vision comes to pass? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really a simple question. That's how simple it is. I think maybe I'll come to you. I think the simple question should be taken by
by the simple lady. Thank you for the question. The youth have great potential. You have the creativity, but you don't have the money. The investor has the money, but lacks the creativity. And that is the intersection with IP. So when you have your ideas and you put it in, you fix those ideas. So for instance, you are into farming. So you have found a way of, I can't get a good example with your farming, so let me use a product. So someone develops something. Most of our youth are into these apps and digital, space and all that. So he comes up with some really good app. He doesn't even know how to diffuse that technology. But if he takes steps to have the protection that he needs, the investor will be interested in the app, because the protection gives that person, the owner, some monopoly. So the investor will be interested in that monopoly and invest in that. So you end up starting your business, you end up employing your colleagues, and you build your business from there. But if you don't have any protection, why would the investor want to invest in your business? The investor would rather take the app from you for free, and it's happening all over. People share their ideas with the giants, and they are taken away from them because you did not take steps to protect. So that is a way you have to look at, and I believe you can protect what you have, and protection is not that expensive in Ghana because we are trying to promote creativity. So you start with that. You can consult any IP support service provider. I do. You can ask me questions about your field, and I may direct you as to the best way to approach it and to monetize those creative ideas that you have. It's very important. Thank you.
So I wanted to add something quickly to your question. And I'm a very practical person, right? You have a farm and you need to expose your product, your farm, for people to know. I have a business myself. When I started my business, I needed to get a really good website. So I battered with the web designer to do my website in exchange for also providing some legal services to make up for that. So you go on places like Facebook. Don't go there to find friends or watch YouTube videos. There are a lot of groups and marketplaces. Go there and find someone who can help you with what you need. And you have something of value in your hands. So what can you exchange so that it will be profitable? That is the really beauty of the internet, and we have to really use it in a practical way to address solution. Because to even have someone to invest in you, you have to develop your product, you have to do it to a certain level for someone to actually see and say, okay, this is what you're building, this is what I can do to help you. So we shouldn't be so focused on, oh, I need investors, capital, and all of this. We have to really be broad in our thinking and looking at the other resources that are already available and how we can capitalize on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's the whole thing about leveraging on digitization. So when you are going to farm, let the world know that you have left your home, you are heading to the farm. And when you come back, let us know. And we'll come for some coconuts and some cassava and all of that. It's the whole thing about marketing. Okay, so, and it will cost you less now to do all of these things, and you have a global reach, a continental reach. Okay, so let's not look at this whole. You have a question, right? Okay, great. So let's not look at this whole thing about website being a constraint, but it's an enabler. You can start small as how small your business is, and then you scale up. I can see that the questions are concentrated in this area. So I'm going to use the powers that I have to move in another direction. Okay, and I'll pretend like I've not seen you. Okay. Okay, so yes, I have a question here. Can we get, okay, a mic?
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, after listening to the whole presentation, I'm very excited about the whole thing. And I'm very excited that Africa is coming together to do something for themselves. And what AfCFTA is doing has really excited me. But there's a question that is lingering at the back of my mind. Yes, we are trying to accelerate trade within Africa. But one problem I noticed that they talked about was transportation. I know every country is able to produce something and give to another country. But my question is, how are we going to solve the transportation issues? For example, looking at just our neighborhood here in Burkina Faso, we noticed that they produce a lot of tomatoes. And these things are put in trucks. And by the time they get in Ghana, most of them are already perished. So how are we going to make sure that we are going to transact within ourselves? Because if someone wanted to trade, maybe to send these tomatoes to Europe, it takes only a day and in a very comfortable manner. How are we going to ensure this within our own countries, within the region? Also an example of flowers. Kenya produces a lot of flowers, and every day they are transporting these flowers to Europe, and they're getting lots of dollars. How can we, and yet in our own African countries, we'd also love to have flowers. So how are we going to make sure that we are able to manage ourselves and have these people maybe bring flowers to African countries instead of sending them outside? And then what is AfCFTA doing to make sure? Because for trade to move, you really also need transportation, proper transportation. So what is AfCFTA doing to ensure that we have proper transportation, quick transportation, and something of the sort? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is a little above simple question. Yeah. And I think it typifies what the other gentleman said about getting a container from Spain to just carry something from there to another African country. If you look at Africa from the days of colonization to now, you can see everything that is designed we have here is to serve the rest of the world and not ourselves. It's very obvious. And the reason is simple. We were supposed to be producers of primary raw materials to feed industries elsewhere. And the both transportation network and the financial arrangement and all of that were designed to support that. And there's every effort to keep it at that. And that is why I said that where we have these challenges, and we are talking about a population of 1.3 billion, and this huge lack of fiscal connectivity is a challenge, but it's also an investment opportunity for us to begin to package this and invest in improving the fiscal connectivity and reduce the transaction costs. We cannot look to the rest of the world to finance this. And that is why I talked about the fact that development finance institutions within the continent, the likes of African Development Bank, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, and the rest, must use the strength of their balance sheets to finance this infrastructure that will work for Africa. But we are already failing from that point. And I will not be shy to talk about this, because in academia, we are told that we speak our mind if we had one of our own. The reason I'm saying so is that if you look at the financing arrangement of all the programs to internalize AfCFTA, it's currently being financed by outsiders. You check. Almost all the programs, I'm sure, boss, if we check the people who are paying this bill, I don't want to use you as a sample size, but you ask yourself, who are those investing in making sure that we close all these gaps? And there's no country that will put money in anything solely for the benefit of those people. No. Capital would only go to where it feels loved. So they will put their money where they think their interest will be served. And when you check in the last 15 years, the number of embassies that have been opened on the continent, from China and the rest of them, it's not just that they want to give you visa. The US embassy here, how huge it is, it's not just for visa, they could do it from a kiosk. Because they have billions of dollars of investment interest here. If you look at the relationship between France and Cote d'Ivoire, it's not just for the peace of Cote d'Ivoire and the rest of them. So we must look at all these things broadly and then put a package together that makes us to lay hold of the gains from this. Other than that, globalization teaches us that the fact that you have the item necessarily doesn't mean you will benefit from it. I hope that answers this semi-simple question.
And yeah, I would just want to add to that you identify a problem, right, in terms of the transportation. And when we think of capital, we think, okay, we have to go to the Exim Bank or go to some commercial bank in order to get, but again, practical solutions like crowdfunding. So you and your friends, I'm sure, like if I look on your WhatsApp, I will find almost more than 50 or so. You are in different groups. So you can crowdfund to start even some of these, whether it's getting access to one container, the issue of refrigeration. So you can take a small part of it as part of being a citizen of this continent, and also be part of the solution as well. Because you don't have to be a millionaire to be able to invest. You can still invest with your friends, with your family together. So we need to also begin to think about some of these things that we can do.
Because we are talking about transportation, I see the man from Borderless Alliance leaving. This is the time to talk about borders. So I think you have to solve this problem for us. People are talking about how do they carry flowers from Kenya to Ghana. right? And the tomato, how does it get faster from Burkina Faso to Ghana? Because we really like tomatoes. And then the freight forwarders president is also here. You must be carrying all these things across the borders. And you have a way of overcoming these border challenges. So I think I must come to you so that you can actually bring this tomato to us faster than it has been all this while.
Thank you very much. So I don't have any magical way of bringing goods from Burkina to, I facilitate it because we're architects of transport. Well, I had a 3-minute speech, I think, once we've gotten here, so I can go into it, because basically I realized that everything we've been talking about here, the transport issue, is the core thing. We're having a discussion recently in Congo, and I said, I was really torn apart whether we started the basis for this whole discussion is right. Because if we do not have the basics right, then it's not going to work. I had to go to Congo, and just to go to Congo, if you look at the map, you realize that if there was a direct flight, it could just take me maybe an hour and a half to fly into Congo. But then we had to go to Togo. It takes about 55 minutes. Then you had to go through all the rigors of checking in and all that, waiting for the next flight. Then we flew from Togo to Kinshasa. The difficulty is that, you see, if we do not have the basics, like I said, we used to have the Black Star lines and the airlines. Even look at air transport. That is the difficulty. Intra-Africa. If we want to carry containers, all these boxes cannot move by air. They can go by sea. I'll give you an example. That if we do not create an enabling environment for setting up maybe special purpose vehicles, for the creation of maybe some shipping lines, just to run the West African coast. Okay? The difficulty again is that the cartels now, and I call them cartels because we know that the shipping lines is a huge business, and they want to see this fail, because if they do not do that, when doctor said that if you need to take a box to Congo, it has to go to Algeciras, to Spain, and come down. Now look at the distance, how much time it takes. But how do we create an enabling environment for somebody who wants to set up a shipping line to do this? So let's say government of Ghana says, look, let's create a special purpose vehicle. If you, some businessmen come together and have 2 or 3 vessels, says, okay, vessels do not just run, they need cargo to move. So the government of Ghana says that, okay, because you are doing this for the West African region, I am going to give you 40% of my cocoa that goes outside. So at least you could always have cargo to take. And then when you come down, you could also do the, the coastal service and run. At least then they have some assurances from the government. Because those who are carrying all these cargoes are these big time shipping lines. And because they form cartels, they want to take all that business from it. But if the government across Africa says, okay, then because of that, we are going to give you these programs, then they will have something to run on, or else they're going to lose money. I know of examples of some, a couple of businessmen who have tried to run even one vessel along our shores, and they don't survive because the big boys will cut them out. Same thing with road transport. Even between us, if you look at Burkina Faso and Ghana, one of the commerce department decided that, okay, there should be a certain transport arrangement so that cargoes that are coming, because they are land linked, so that all their cargoes come through our ports. So we're going to give 40% of the transporting business to the Ghanaian transporters. What happens? They take 60, we take 40. We said, that's fine. Then what happens? Our drivers, this is Africa, intra-Africa, from Ghana to Burkina, our drivers get caught up there and they are beaten, whipped so bad, nobody would want to send his driver up there. So there are lots of things that have to be looked at, because without that, this, it will be a lot of talk. But then we can, like my sister said, if you want to move flowers from Kenya, there's no direct flight. Well, at least in Kenya to Ghana, there are direct flights, but does it happen in every African country? That will seriously have to be looked at, the infrastructure and basic transport is all of it. If we do not look at that first, then we might be doing a lot of talk.
Well spoken, my senior brother, and thank you, Prof, for catching me on my way out, because I had to pick up my wife from the other side of town. So I'll be very brief, but I'll build on what my brother just said. And it's not just about the connectivity in shipping lines, but it's also in the connectivity of air transportation across Africa. And it's as this, I agree with what you were saying earlier, the fact that if you think about it too much, you will find that all of the elements are playing in our view that people just don't want to connect the various African markets and African countries to each other. And so the first thing that we need to think about is to change this kind of mindset from trading with Africa to trading across Africa. There are markets across Africa to be seen. There are market linkages which we should work on. And once we identify the markets, the question becomes, how do we get the goods and services from this country to that country? But the important element is not only to rely on the ingenuity of a private sector to find solutions around problems. The main challenge is to solve these problems which are creating the impediments, which is forcing private sector members to turn around the problem, add to their cost, become less competitive in the process of doing that, and then people clapping for us for failing. I have seen this phenomenon on and on and on, for our development partners clapping for us for solving a problem in the wrong way. And this has got to stop. It has to stop with us. It has to start with massing enough political will to support the change in the mindset and also the change in the system, which Eddie was talking about. So what's exactly the problem with short sea shipping and cabotage across Africa? The main reason why a ship or a ship owner cannot pick up cargo simply from one country or one port in a country to the other is because, first of all, there's a lack of a general framework that regulates the economic operators in that industry. And second, there is a lack of a political will between the countries to come up together and decide that we can open up, or the technical word is liberalize their markets to receive cargo by sea from one country to the other. And this would take a bold decision at the level of the African Union. So AfCFTA is a good tool for trade, but there are other instruments that are equally important that will add some synergy effect into the AfCFTA. And I'm thinking about, for example, the agreement on the free movement of persons. And that agreement doesn't receive, unfortunately, as much visibility as the AfCFTA. But the fact of the matter is, if you can't move to the country where you are trading, trade doesn't go by itself. People take their goods and their services and they trade. If they can't move freely, they can't trade freely. So that one also needs to be focused in order to supplement the AfCFTA. And the last one is, well, there are actually two additional ones. The Pan-African payment and settlement system, which we keep hearing about, which will eliminate the high transaction costs between the various currencies, which is intentionally kept non-convertible so that we become more difficult to trade among ourselves. So we need to abolish some of these barriers which are artificial. They are man-made. And if anything that is man-made can be undone by man. And the last one, the last of our opportunities that will supplement the AfCFTA would be the protocol. No, not a protocol actually. It is a single African air transportation market, which has the potential to open up the African skies to air transportation across the continent. Now we all know that the air travel industry, aviation industry, has suffered badly from the COVID and other external shocks. So why can't we use the opportunity of the AfCFTA and the single African air transportation market to also build the political momentum to open up our skies, to enable the local air companies to be able to ship cargo across countries, whether by air or by sea or other, and at the same time, if we make it easier for people to move around. This is what I wanted to say around the topic of the AfCFTA. And as a conclusion, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a key. It's not a magic wand. It is what we want to do with it that will matter eventually. And we need to make sure that we give it the right attention and that we push our leaders to give it the right attention and to push it. Thank you.
Very much. Great. You can go and take your wife now. You've done so well. You've done so well. Great, great. I'm going to get to you now for your question. Can I get someone to assist me with a mic around, please? Okay.
The young lady's concerns about SMEs and the fact that they're already crowded out. I mean, they don't have the financial muscle to take on big ticket transactions if you compare them to all these big companies. So I'm sure after comes and they are wondering, okay, the market is open now, it means this is going to deepen our woes. So I think her major problem is there any policy or is there any protocol for SMEs or small businesses at the secretariats that would directly, render some form of funding? I don't know if that's her concern, but I agree on leveraging on digitization and growing your business. I agree on that, but I'm sure that that's her concern. But my question really is about visibility and awareness and knowledge. The recent Ghana Statistical Service report says only 26.2% of firms in Ghana are aware of AfCFTA. I'm not sure what the statistics says with other African countries, but this is Ghana. I don't know whether it's early days yet because we are just 6 months into trading, but I think it's worrying. I'm not sure whether people are just not interested or they think AfCFTA is up there and we are down there. What else can we do to increase visibility and knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I think that's an interesting question. I saw the report, and I think that tells us that there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I believe that is where the APN comes in handy, and of course working with the media and all of that. There's one thing hearing about AfCFTA, and another thing knowing the content and being able to take advantage of that. But we must also understand that as a country, we cannot outsource the competitiveness of our SME or private sector to the secretariat. Every country has a responsibility in building the capacity of their private sector, SMEs, whatever, to take advantage of that. It's just because people don't understand the AfCFTA because it comes at a cost. There is tariff liberalization, which will mean physical losses of revenue to the government. The only way the government could close that gap is when the private sector is doing well and taking advantage of the bigger market and accommodating bigger profit and taxes, and the rest of that will come to government. So we should not look to the secretariat to solve the problems of our private sector. Because we are hosting the secretariat, but we are not hosting the gains. The secretariat is for the entire continent, not only for Ghana. Okay, so, but I also believe that SMEs, through pooling and the rest of them, you may be small, but when you come together, you can take advantage and all of that. So let's not go individuals. In fact, one of the things that affect us Africans is that we prefer to be 100% owner of a small pie than a 5% owner of a bigger pie. All right, so we coming to, if there's any, we have Ghana Bankers Association here, Ghana Chamber of SMEs. We want to take some few comments from you. So do we have GUTA, Ghana Union of Traders Association? Other than that, our time up here is expiring right now, and we are going to exit. Thank you very much for the perspective that you brought to bear. Very, very grateful, and thank you also for the dimension you brought to bear from diaspora and how they can help and how they are integral to this AfCFTA. And thank you also for taking time to listen to us. We are very grateful. Thank you.